So we've heard some news this week in the market and in the industry press and in the world of UK politics about the changes that the government are suggesting they may make. That hasn't been announced for sure.
Drip feeding it before the November.
They love the classic budget. Drip feed, just tease it in. About the sellers, I'm going to pick that part up first. Sellers taking more responsibility for the costs of the transaction. What are your thoughts?
I'm not against that. I think a lot of what's come out this week as a headline is relatively positive. It's the detail that we're probably more concerned about. And if sellers are paying money to, and they almost are as an industry, I think we've moved a little bit over the last few years. Anyway, home information packs going back a few years would have started this, but now it's not unusual for clients to invest in some of their marketing, or we've got AML where clients are paying for. So we're starting to see a behaviour where clients are paying money up front that never used to happen 15 years ago. And I think, look, if properties are coming to the market and they are ready and that information is up front, it's more transparent, then I think that's got to be better for the buyer. I think it's better for the seller as well, because there's no point taking a transaction 8 weeks down the line for someone to fall out of it because you've got something you already
there was
knew.
a covenant on,
Absolutely. So I'm all for that. I think it's just the detail, and it's got some challenges in terms of how that rolls out in terms of the legality of lifetime of searches would be one, that if we're going to have upfront surveys, great. How long does that survey actually last for? Because if you're on the market for 18 months.
Yeah,
did you listen to the last podcast?
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I listened to it yesterday.
We predicted this conversation was coming, but we were talking about upfront surveys. Now, surveys are, like you say, a window of use, if you like, or and the seller would be responsible for maybe making sure the works are carried out and that those things are allayed before a buyer comes to the party. But it feels like that's quite a positive thing from where I stand in terms of having a property that's ready, more ready.
Yeah, there's a few points to that to look at. And first is, like you said, it's been free to list your house for years and years and years and years, which means it brings a lot of time wasters. A lot of people going, let's test the market. And if I can get £200,000 more than what it's worth, I'll sell. That I don't want that on my books. I'm wasting money, time, resources on you. You'll never move. It'll never sell. So if a seller is not willing to invest, so for me in the upper end of the market, I've got a marketing contribution, minimum £1,000 plus VAT, goes up to £1,500 plus VAT, depending on, the size of the property, what I need. And that is just a tiny little bit of what we spend. But for me, if a vendor is not willing to put £1,000 down on their largest asset to show commitment to me, I'm not showing commitment to you by spending thousands and thousands and thousands on the marketing. So I never have pushback from that, extremely rarely.
Does that just come off your end fee?
No, they pay it right away.
So it's that and that.
Yeah, but then I don't have a tie-in period for my contract. So, I'm not tying you in for 20 weeks. If I'm not doing my job, you should be able to go somewhere else, right? I don't lose clients, because I know I can do my job and they trust me. But then I do have to have some form of commitment from you in another way. And if you're going to be putting some money on the line, then it shows me, okay, you're committed. And I have had some people go, I'm not paying anything. I don't even know if I want to sell. I'm like, great, you're not my client. Go to the free agent who won't charge anything, who will put your house on that £200,000 more. But I'm not for you.
Yeah.
So I think if the sellers have to invest in things, that's going to help agents get better clients. And then the second part is actually having the information. Like you said, the fact that somebody can pull out the day before exchange, have no legal ramifications, completely broken in my head. But if you don't know about this covenant that says that, I don't know, you can't have chickens on your land, and you literally have 20 chickens that you're bringing and you want land because you want your chickens, you're going to pull out. And I use that scenario because I have had a property where
I was going to ask you that.
A half of the garden, you weren't allowed to keep chickens on that half.
Really?
So at the viewing, I would ask, do you have chickens? And they're like, yeah, we do. I'm like, you'd have to keep them on this side because for some reason, the covenant says you can't on that side.
So you seem to go a little bit over and above with making sure that you get as much information at the start.
Yes. So
because I imagine doing a viewing at that end of the market is time consuming.
You need to know the house to sell the house. You need to know what the ins and outs are. I had a house in a chain where Oxford University owned a piece of land in front of their house. So that piece of land was leased. but then there was so many covenants on it that you would never build on it. But then what happens if the Oxford University take away that lease? Then you don't own the front part of your house. Like, there's so many things. But so for me, I get all of my sellers legally ready before they even go to the market. So I've got a lady, she used to be a solicitor. She left to create this own company of herself. I can share her name if anybody needs this, because I pay £100 and she contacts my sellers. She gets all their protocol forms filled out. She helps get all the right documentation, electrical forms, all these things. Oh, planning, blah, blah, blah. She sends me a pack. I have it all there, and then I can launch it. I can do viewings. I know. And the thing is, you ask sellers, do you have any covenants? And they go, I don't know. And then you get the pack and there's 10. And you're like, these 4 don't matter, but these 3 really do matter. So, at the end of the day, if I can launch my properties with that, it also means that when I have a sale agreed, the draft contract is out within 24 hours. Just saved 4 weeks. So for me, it's all about doing that and making sure things go much, much faster with less fall through. Because if in 2 months they figure out they can't have their chickens on that land, they're going to pull out. And then where am I left? Exactly.
So just coming back to that, so that first part that we were talking about, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
It's only a good thing. The other part that I know you've this is actually separate to this reform, actually, is the way stamp duty is being paid. Now, you had a different idea, but it sounds to me, through the drip feed of what might be coming, that there's going to be a property tax. Now, what they're suggesting, I think, is over £500,000 for a property to have like a property tax. And what do you know about that? In what do you think?
The property tax, in terms of what they're floating, is effectively an annual tax on properties that sell for over £500,000. Or I guess it's vague. Is it properties that have sold for over £500,000 or properties that are worth £500,000? Take you back to days slightly before myself. Window tax. People start breaking up their windows. Do people start knocking down outbuildings to try and make their property less valuable to fall below the tax? I think the danger with targeting a part of the market, one might argue stamp duty targets parts of the market anyway because people pay different rates, but I think targeting such a market in that way is going to have a knock-on impact naturally. That market will slow, which will impact the market below it, and so on and so forth. That would be my fear. So I again, lacking a huge amount of detail, but based on a tax purely on properties because they're worth £500,000, I think is relatively dangerous for the whole market.
See, I have a different point of view. Because so in Canada, you don't have stamp duty, but you have yearly property tax. And it means that the property market moves quicker, smoother, allows people to buy easier. So if, and at my houses that I'm selling, I had one, their stamp duty was £160,000. And you think, that's a lot of money to be putting on a property. So what if they didn't have that 160K to put, but every year they paid $8,000? I mean, personally, I'd rather do that. I'd rather pay the $8,000 every year because I can put that aside. I can allocate it just like another tax. But that 160K, I mean, what can you do with that money? You can renovate the property. You can buy a bit bigger. You can put in investments and stocks and shares and make some money there. And, so the fact that stamp duty is so high does restrict the market. And if you look at countries who don't necessarily have that stamp duty, but they have a monthly year, I don't know how they're going to do it. It actually turns quicker.
Does the question back on that, which is quite interesting to hear with Canada, but is the tax on every price bracket?
I don't actually know. Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't actually know.
I think fundamentally that's the difference for myself. If the tax was on every bracket, then I think the argument changes slightly. If you're just taxing a certain market, because what we don't want to do is create a market that stops people from downsizing, and that's part of the argument.
The lower end would still have that stamp duty.
That's
the lower what they're end, talking about.
Absolutely. So, well, they haven't said that. So they're talking about bringing in an annual property tax for 500. They're not saying what they're going to do with the rest of the stamp duty. No. So one assumes they're abolishing that piece because they haven't referred to it, but that could be a terrible assumption as well, and they might leave it there. Yeah,
because they're still wanting to keep the stamp duty for second properties, irrelevant of the price.
Yeah.
So maybe if they do, and I see what you mean, because I think in Canada it's every price point. I don't think there's a cutoff. I think it's everyone. There's just no stamp duty. Because my parents didn't understand it, and they're like, "What do you mean? You have to pay all that money up front?"
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how lenders look at that. Make the assumption that it comes in, and there's an annual tax that you pay. How do lenders then look at that when you come to remortgage? Because that's a financial commitment that you've got. It's no different to a car loan or something else at that point. So that's one for them to answer.
I think it'll also make people sell less regularly and stay in their properties longer, because what she's talking about is over 500,000 would only come into play when you buy. So if you've already paid your stamp duty, you already own that £1 million house, you wouldn't have any yearly tax. So how that person who may have upsized or downsized, whatever it is, in a year, they'll probably stretch that out to 5-6 years because they're like, hey, I don't have to pay that extra tax. So it will stall some parts of the market. But then I do see some positive to making moving more accessible, because a lot of first-time buyers as well, like they don't have that extra 30K of stamp duty. Okay, first-time buyers are different in our worlds, but some of my clients, like they just don't have that extra 30, 40. And if it's a second property, my goodness, the 3 to 5% jump that's happened, like that was not fair in itself. Like that is such a big chunk of money. So I think there's pros and cons to both, but like you said, it depends on how they're going to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we can all agree if they abolish it, that would be everyone's choice.
That was your original angle.
Well, my original angle went. So I sat down. It was probably February, March when we were come to the end of the stamp duty holiday, and you just seen the immense pressure on estate agents, conveyancers, mortgage brokers, and the customer. Everyone under a huge amount of pressure just to make a deadline.
It happened in 2021 or whenever it was.
It's been repetitive now for a few times because the government will switch on stamp duty and play it as a bit of a tool to boost the economy as and when they see fit.
Bit of a band-aid though, isn't it? It's not really
so eradicating it, great. I think the government are in a bit of a dark hole. I mean, when we talk about 12 billion a year in tax, not all of that from property. It's about 3/4 from property. If they eradicate it, where do they get it from somewhere else? And I think there's a reasonable argument that the uplift in economy, if you got rid of it, would cover it. I think that argument is quite difficult in a relatively flat market in a world where growth is quite challenging. And if the market goes backwards, that argument starts to disappear. So I started to petition, along with the team at Andrews, to spread the cost of stamp duty over a period of time. So almost back to your point, it'll almost act as a property tax to a point. But my view is it's attached to the property, and if you sell the property, you've got to pay that off before you move, so the stamp duty is cleared. And largely, it takes away. Most people sell their house, not all, but the vast majority will sell their house, and out of the equity of their current home, they will use that to pay their move-in fees. Okay, which means they're effectively adding the cost of their stamp duty onto the mortgage and paying interest on it for 25 years. So that doesn't seem to be friendly. And to your point of first-time buyers, London particularly, first-time buyers may well be buying over 500, don't get the stamp duty relief. So they're sitting in rented longer, saving money, rather than being able to move on to the market.
Like a vicious
being in
cycle.
the market.
It's just a complete cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,